There's been another major blow to the US India trade talks. President Donald Trump says he will not restart negotiations with New Delhi, not until we get it resolved, he said Thursday. Now, this comes at the back of Trump unilaterally slapping massive 50% tariffs on Indian goods in retaliation to New Delhi's purchase of Russian oil. Listen in.
President, just to follow up on the India tariffs, do you expect increased trade negotiations, since you've announced the 50% tariff?
No, not until we get it resolved.
Mr. President, just to follow up on the India tariffs, do you expect increased trade negotiations, since you've announced the 50% tariff?
No, not until we get it resolved.
Mr. President, just to follow up on the India.
Meanwhile, US State Department's principal spokesperson Tommy Pigott has underlined that India is a strategic partner with whom Washington engages in a full and frank dialogue, and that'll continue. Listen in.
What this is about is an honest, full and frank dialogue about real concerns that this administration has, that the president has outlined very clearly, addressing those concerns through his actions. He's spoken about them, whether it's about the purchase of Russian oil, whether it's about the trade imbalance. Addressing those concerns is important. So the president's been very clear. His concerns about what he has seen from India speak for themselves. He's truthed multiple times about it. But ultimately, this is about a frank and full dialogue, and that's what it means to advance American interests. That's what it means to really have full diplomatic dialogue with partners to address concerns that we need to see addressed. What this is about is an honest, full and frank dialogue about real concerns that this administration has, that the president has outlined very clearly, addressing those concerns through his actions. He's spoken about them, whether it's about the purchase of Russian oil, whether it's about the trade imbalance. Addressing those concerns is important. So the president's been very clear. His concerns about what he has seen from India speak for themselves. He's truthed multiple.
In a high-stakes diplomatic move, Prime Minister Narendra Modi received a phone call from Brazilian President Luiz Ignacio Lula da Silva, just as global concerns rise over Donald Trump's tariff spree. While India's official statement avoided mentioning US tariffs, sources suggest Brazil's Lula reached out to coordinate a response. Now, both leaders reaffirmed their commitment to boosting the India-Brazil strategic partnership, focusing on areas including trade, technology, energy and defense. Now, with both countries hit by steep US import hikes, this conversation signals a deepening alliance between the global South powers determined to protecting their economies. Modi later called the talk meaningful and people-centric. My colleague Vishal Vivek gets you more on this.
Every time Trump seems to be making a statement against one of the BRICS nations, these nations seem to be rallying with each other, and the latest in that category is China. China's ambassador to India has clearly stated that Trump is a bully. If you give him an inch, he'll take a mile. So that's a big attack on Trump. He's gone on to say that he actually means that China is actually backing India on this, which is a rare instance because, as I mentioned, BRICS seems to be solidifying in the backdrop of Trump's repeated attacks. Trump has attacked almost all the BRICS nations with heavy tariffs. Both Brazil and India now face 50% and above tariffs. And as you mentioned, President Lula of Brazil and Prime Minister Modi spoke last night. And now the Chinese envoy has also commented on the same issue. It's a rare instance of all these nations really unifying against Trump. And Lula has gone one step further and said that he's not willing to even speak with Trump, but instead he'll speak with other leaders of BRICS such as Prime Minister Modi and President Putin and President Xi Jinping. So that goes to show that Trump seems to be isolated on the international stage as far as tariffs are concerned.
National Security Advisor Ajit Doval met Russian President Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin on Thursday. Now, a video released by the Kremlin press service captured the moment Doval warmly shook hands with Putin before the two leaders sat down for high-level talks, just as you see on your screens right now. Now, this key meeting is a part of Doval's visit to Moscow, signaling a deepening of strategic ties between New Delhi and Russia. Now, earlier, Doval also met with Russian Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu. The visit comes just ahead of a trip by President Putin to India later this year and amid growing tensions, needless to say, between New Delhi and Washington. In a major diplomatic development, the Kremlin says Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin will meet in the coming days. Now, Trump recently said there's a very good prospect of a summit that could in fact include Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, aiming to jumpstart stalled peace talks over the war in Ukraine. Now, Zelensky has backed the idea, while Putin called a meeting with Zelensky far off for now. Meanwhile, Trump's deadline for Russia to agree to a ceasefire or face tougher sanctions expires Friday. Talks could happen as soon as next week, possibly in the UAE for all we know. Meanwhile, Russia continues heavy airstrikes and the US has just approved fresh $200 million in new military aid for Ukraine. My colleague Vishal Vivek joins us for more on this. Vishal, what's the latest you're picking up, and how might this geopolitical play, if we may call it, play out in the longer run?
See, all eyes will be on this big meet, Trump-Putin meet. Whenever they meet, the date has not been confirmed yet, but the Kremlin has confirmed that the meeting indeed will take place in the coming days. They have not, as I mentioned the exact date or time or the venue of the big meeting. But whether or not this meeting will yield any results, that's the biggest question. Whether or not this will pave the way for the war to be ended, that is also another question, because this war has been grinding for more than 3 years now, killed thousands of people. Each month, thousands are getting killed. So far, there's no end in sight because there's a deadlock between both the sides, Russia and Ukraine. Both are standing their ground. Russia doesn't want to let go of the territory it has occupied. Ukraine, on the other hand, is not ready to relent. Russia has been gaining some ground in its summer offensive. Will it be willing to let go of that offensive, let go of that advantage? That is also one of the biggest questions. So far, Russian President Putin has stalled Trump on whenever the US side has tried to calm the situation down. Repeated talks have not yielded any result. This will be one of the biggest inflection points in the history of the war, but still the larger question remains whether this war will actually be ended.
Summing it up, Vishal, 3 years down the line, diplomacy still remains in the doldrums. Thank you so much for getting us the latest there. Moving on and shifting our focus to the other conflict raging in the Middle East, where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office says the country's security cabinet has approved a plan to take over Gaza City. Now, the decision taken early on Friday, the 8th of August, for perspective, marks another escalation of Israel's 22-month offensive launched in response to Hamas's October 7th attack. Families and supporters of the hostages, meanwhile, protested in Tel Aviv and outside Netanyahu's office in Jerusalem as the security cabinet discussed these plans. Some demonstrators also chained themselves to each other and warned that the move may very well be a death sentence of their loved ones. Meanwhile, NDTV World's Vishnu Shom gets you the latest from Jerusalem.
Responding to a question which I posed to him here in Jerusalem on the potential impact on people in Gaza, whether there would be an increased number of casualties if Israel were to enhance their missions in the Gaza Strip, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, said that Israel didn't have any plans at annexing Gaza itself. However, there would be a significant move, it appears, in the near future, which would ultimately lead to the creation of a transitional authority which would look at the entire Gaza situation. Now, that transitional authority would only be created, or Gaza itself would be handed over to the transitional authority once there was a security perimeter which was created by Israel. Now, the boundaries of that transition, of what Israel plans in terms of the security perimeter were not defined to me, but it does appear that that's something which the Israeli armed forces, the Israeli government would look at very closely once they're able to separate Hamas terrorists from innocent people in the Gaza Strip. Benjamin Netanyahu also making it clear that the situation would be much better if Hamas were to lay down their arms immediately and call for a ceasefire, so that there could be a process of getting back the hostages, because that is the biggest priority of Israel. Remember, there are 50-odd hostages who are still in the Gaza Strip being held by Hamas. It's believed that the large number of them are alive. But this news of what Israel plans to do next with Gaza comes at a time when international efforts to try and bring a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip have failed. Israel has now decided to act to try and end that crisis in Gaza once and for all. The Prime Minister also making it clear to us that Hamas would not have any role in this transitional authority. In Jerusalem, with camera person Xavier Thomas, Vishnu Shom for NDTV.
Now shifting focus, Indonesia, the world's most populous Muslim-majority nation, is preparing Kalang, an uninhabited island on the northwest side of the country, to treat around 1,000 wounded people from the Gaza Strip. Now, the announcement was made Thursday by Indonesia's Foreign Minister Sugiono, who, like other Indonesians, uses one name only. Now, the minister said that Indonesia was looking at Kalang as a place to treat Palestinians because the island was used as a COVID treatment center recently, with the infrastructure already in place there. Here's more.
Kita bersedia untuk merawat sampai 1.000 anak-anak ataupun korban terluka yang membutuhkan perawatan medis. Tentu saja dengan satu setujuan dari seluruh pihak terkait di sana, setujuan dari negara-negara tetangganya langsung, Jordan, Mesir, dan tentu saja otoritas Palestina sendiri. Dan dalam rangka persiapan itu kita juga menyiapkan alternatif lokasi di mana kita bisa menampung dan merawat mereka.
We shift our focus westwards, where the Trump administration is doubling to $50 million reward for the arrest of Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro, accusing him of being one of the world's largest narco traffickers and working with cartels to flood the US with fentanyl-laced cocaine. That's correct. Maduro was in fact indicted in Manhattan federal court back in 2020. This was during the first Trump presidency, along with several close allies, on federal charges of narco-terrorism and conspiracy to in fact import cocaine. Now, at the time, the US offered a $15 million reward for his arrest. That was later raised by the Biden administration to a whopping $25 million, the same amount the US offered for the capture of Osama bin Laden following the September 11, 2001 attacks. For perspective. Shifting focus far east, where heavy rain pounded the southern Japanese island of Kyushu on Friday, triggering floods and landslides and also sending residents to shelters. This as officials issued the highest level warnings in parts of the region. A mudslide hit a house in Aira city in the Kagoshima prefecture, burying 2 people who were rescued and taken to hospital. This is according to updates from the Fire and Disaster Management Agency of the prefecture, mind you. Now, the agency issued evacuation advisories to over 360,000 people in the Kagoshima prefecture and the neighboring Miyazaki. Television footage shows muddy water gushing down swollen rivers. Meanwhile, in Kirishima, floodwater was up to knee level at a shopping mall. That's the latest update we're getting for you right here on the World Report. Meanwhile, torrential rains have caused severe flooding and mudslides in northwestern China's Gansu province since Thursday afternoon. This has forced evacuations that's also prompted large-scale rescue operations. In the Linahui Autonomous Prefecture, authorities relocated 32 residents overnight as rising floodwaters threatened homes. Meanwhile, Dokchiang County saw roads destroyed by mudslides, with police working to rescue trapped residents, as you see on your screen right now. The region remains under heavy rainfall, with the Kangale and other counties issuing red alerts for heavy rain. China's most severe weather warning is some areas are expected to receive over 100 millimeters of accumulated rainfall by Friday evening. Over in the neighborhood, Japanese warship docked in New Zealand on Friday for the first time in almost 90 years. Now, this comes amid efforts by Tokyo to deepen its strategic ties in the South Pacific Ocean. 2 destroyers with over 500 crew sailed into Wellington Harbour, accompanied by New Zealand Navy ship HMNZS Canterbury. Now, the JS ISE and destroyer JS Suzunami were on an Indo-Pacific deployment and arrived from Sydney, where Japan's military took part this month in war games involving New Zealand, Australia and other countries. The Wellington visit, meanwhile, was ceremonial, but it comes as Japan has increasingly sought to deepen bilateral military cooperation amid ongoing regional tensions. Now, Japan's only treaty ally is the United States. Here's more.
Our defense forces are developing the cooperative work, not only with New Zealand and Australia, but also with many Pacific Island countries. So, main goal is a free and open Pacific in the Pacific.
More Americans are now viewing China as a competitor rather than an enemy. This is according to a private survey conducted by One Third Way. It's a US national think tank. For perspective, now the 2025 survey shows that the share of Americans who see China as competitor increased from 34% in 2023 to 42% in 25. The proportion of Americans taking hostile attitudes toward China, in fact, has dropped from earlier 36% in 23 to 29% this year. Now, as a result of this, more than half of the respondents to the survey now favor cooperation over standing up to China. The share increased by 20%, flipping the overall policy preference. Meanwhile, Third Way also said Americans' softening attitudes towards China comes amid increasing awareness of the role China plays in their daily lives.